Hello, good day, everyone. Thank you for joining today's panel. My name is Jeremy Richter, Senior Director of MLR and Content Strategy at Indegene. Joining me today are four industry leaders in the regulatory ad promo space, and we'll meet them in a few moments. During our time together, we'll discuss the role of regulatory ad promo in the transformation journey toward modular content, some associated challenges and impacts of the modular content initiative, and change management considerations from a regulatory standpoint. During our discussion, we'll be taking questions via the Q&A function at the bottom of your toolbar. So please feel free to type and submit your questions at any point during today's conversation, and time permitting, I will field those questions and position them to our guests. But before we introduce them, I'd like to take a few moments to set some context. 1 year ago, I moderated a panel on Indegene's vision for MLR of the future, where we described the multi-year journey toward expedited review and approval, specifically the content creation to approval and in market within 24 hours. Today's discussion is a continuation of the same. Since then, the industry has continued to progress, and personalized omni-channel content efforts have been put into practice, making our shift left vision for review and approval impactful and real. For the purposes of today's conversation, we're going to be honing in and focusing on modular content. And depending on who you ask, there are a lot of different definitions when it comes to modular content. So for today, we're saying that modular content is a set of reusable content blocks that are typically called modules or elements that can be combined and reused to create different marketing assets. Each module is self-contained, and it's a unit of content that can be used on its own or combined with other modules. Now, modular content itself is considered to be and have several advantages over traditional content creation methods. First, it is said to be more efficient. Once a module is created, it then can be reused multiple times, which saves time and saves money. Second, it provides flexibility. Modular content can easily be adapted to different channels, different audiences, and then reused. But the challenge, however, is in regard to compliance. So once modules have been created, they would need to be approved for use against regulatory guidelines and restrictions and rules. And in our current regulatory landscape, so too must the final asset be approved. For modular content to be successful, we feel that the entire ecosystem must be underpinned and governed by strict regulatory business rules that dictate what can and can't be used together, using defined parameters that include things such as order, fair balance, and prominence as well. So that brings us to today and to my esteemed colleagues that have joined me. I'd like to now open their mics and let them introduce themselves. And Kevin, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kevin Stark. I work at Organon, a recent spin out of Merck. We're recently only 2 years old, so it's a big effort for us. I've been in the industry over 34 years in many of commercial operations, compliance, and regulatory roles.
Wonderful. Thanks, Kevin. Pankaj, over to you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Pankaj Chandak. I'm Director of Regulatory Affairs at Medtronic Neurovascular, and I've been in the industry for close to 20 years now, mostly working within quality, compliance, and R&D PMO space. So I'm excited about the discussion today and to see what modular content can bring us as we look to the future in ad promo. So yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, Iris, over to you.
Hi, Jeremy. Thank you for that wonderful setup. My name is Iris Gibbs. I head up Regulatory Affairs, Advertising, and Promotion at Indegene. I've been in the industry over 26 years, and I look forward to this discussion as well.
Thanks. And finally, Vishita.
Hi everyone, this is Vashita. I head the medical and compliance review practice at Indegene, and I'm a physician by background. I have about 15 plus years of cumulative clinical as well as industry experience. In my previous roles within the industry, I've headed content writing operations team, but in my current role in the medical and compliance review space, I have partnered with multiple clients, large size, mid size, smaller, pharmaceutical companies, and helped their teams establish the MLR review practice. Great to meet everyone, and looking forward to the discussion today. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you all for joining. Really appreciate you taking your time and joining me to discuss this. It's exciting. We're here. It's happening. So I think for the first question, Iris, if you don't mind, I'll position it to you. Can you tell us what the key accountability is of the regulatory reviewer within the ad promo process?
Sure. So the regulatory function actually owns the process, as it is responsible for submitting materials at the time of first use down to the Office for Prescription Drug Promotion under FDA on the form FDA 2253. With that comes the responsibilities of ensuring fair balance, that materials are not false or misleading, that they are truthful and not misleading, and that we adhere to policy, guidance documents, and the regulations set forth under the Code of Federal Regulations.
Great, thank you. Kevin, is there anything you'd like to add to this accountability list?
Sure. I think it goes back to the core of not just the FDA, guidance and regulations, but also, the spirit of what they say. And in addition, a lot of companies' policies and positions need to be pulled through at the regulatory level, where that we end up to be accountable.
Yeah, great point. Pankaj?
Sure. So in addition to what Iris and Kevin said, I think one of the things that I want to emphasize is regulatory is, let's say, the function when it comes to ad promo material. It is the function that's holding the line. It's the final approval in this process. And also, I think the very important role that regulatory plays, as Iris also mentioned, is ensuring the fair balance, making sure that, both the benefits and the risks are appropriately listed, both from a content standpoint as well as from a formatting, visibility, and let's say making sure from all aspects there. And then the basics of this is, of course, the substantiation of claims, which is non-clinical or clinical data, and regulatory again plays a very key role in making sure that the substantiation is there appropriately, and in partnering with R&D to make sure all the right evidence is there. So those are some of the things I would say regulatory is key to this process.
Yeah, understood. So Kevin, in understanding the accountability within the ad promo space now, how does that change in context of modular content?
Yeah, I think that definitely from a regulatory perspective, anytime that there is consistency with message coming into the review process, is extremely helpful, and making sure that the agreed upon rules and previous decisions are all incorporated into how it comes in. Modular's content, kind of the promise of it, builds on some of those pillars in order to make the review a better, more efficient review. And hopefully in the long run, essentially allowing it to maybe be even being reviewed with a less senior person when the modular content comes in. So there's a lot of promise down the road for efficiencies and time, which, as we say, it's a journey.
Yeah, it sure is. Iris, as the head of regulatory here at Indegene, do you have thoughts on this as well?
Sure, I would add on to what Kevin said. I would say it does only change the regulatory involvement. Maybe upfront it's a little more oversight and inclusion in the creation of content, and as that new model matures and there's more reliability, and we see that it's working well for all functions and partners, I think the regulatory person can then be that more consulting factor. As Kevin said, you know, a less senior person may do that primary review, and the more senior person could just be a QC check to ensure all business rules are still complied with.
Sure. Yeah. It's almost moving that review function to more of an audit function rather than a review. Yeah.
Yeah, I could say that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are obviously other stakeholders at play. Vishita, of course, head of medical, you know, you here as well. So from your perspective, and even looking at medical and legal and regulatory, in all of the stakeholders and functions involved in the process, what is that perception of modular content and the framework? How does for example, Vishita Medical, how do they perceive the framework now?
Sure. So the medical review team as such is involved in doing the grunt work of checking accuracy, context, as well as appropriateness of content, right, against the cited references. So from medical perspective, if we already have reviewed and approved modules that are used to create assets, definitely it's going to increase the efficiency of the reviews. But the important thing is that medical reviewers are also aware of the huge amount of effort that would be required upstream to bring this framework to life, right? We would have to play a more consultative role, for example, working with the marketing teams, helping them understand, you know, how the templates would work, or probably with the regulatory reviewers, you know, checking on the business rules as well. Business rules in itself are very complicated as well. So all in all, you know, medical reviewers, they understand that the process is going to help them increase the efficiency of the review, but they're also aware that, you know, there's a lot that would go in the background to make this happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Thank you. Kevin, additional thoughts here?
Yeah, you know, I think Vishita hit on some key points that the different review functions are going to have different benefits, kind of as this kind of comes to fruition, as well as different inputs and upfront, you know, type of, you know, capacity, you know, into the process. But I really do feel that if standards can be developed and met, you know, in a certain way, it really will allow everyone to get comfortable. But that is a huge step and a huge leap, you know, that we need to build to. And I think that's just really important, that we need to understand that this is going to be a very long journey for all of us to kind of get there and develop these rules and get comfortable that they're being followed, to really allow that flexibility and then ultimately the speed at the end of the day. And what's really, you know, something I've been thinking about the last couple of days with digital assets, this is going to be even much more of a, you know, difficult lift, because of the functionality that comes with every digital asset that is based in there. It's not as easy as what we were just thinking. If we are thinking print and just those archive, that's a whole new level that I've just been thinking about the last couple of days when it comes to this topic.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's true. Iris, your thoughts?
I think regulatory functions or leads will, you know, be concerned about things like the 2253 compliance, of getting materials down to FDA. If modularized, how will they do it? Single submissions, bundled submissions, you know, that the submissions have to happen. They will be concerned about any compliance with those business rules and regulations and policies and things like that. And then there could be the element of more robust monitoring and oversight for those type of assets, again, until there is confidence in the new model. So, and then of course, you know, we're always concerned with the quality of the materials that come into us. And so those things would need to be addressed at a very high level of accuracy.
Yeah, yeah. Pankaj, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think again, in addition to what the panelists have said here, I agree that I think the discipline is required, the work needs to be put in, upfront to be able to utilize the efficiencies. And mainly from a regulatory standpoint, I think the biggest challenge would be in reusing these modules. You have to make sure that the context and the intent as we use them together, or let's say reuse them in different places, that stays intact. The intent of the messaging and how we emphasize on certain messages, all that has to be considered, and the process discipline has to be built to ensure that those nuances are addressed for regulatory reviewers to build that confidence in this process. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So in that, and taking all of this into consideration, what are some preparations that organizations could undertake or must undertake in order to further their modular content journey? And Pankaj, I'll keep it with you to start this.
Sure, yeah, sure. I think that in continuation to what we were talking about just a second ago, I think that the key for organizations to prepare here is the process discipline, to build the internal processes in a way that will help structure, bringing the modular contents up for review, making sure that the evidence traceability stays intact. And it's really a cultural and a mindset shift in taking on this journey. There are definitely fruits at the end of the journey, meaning a lot of time on and the review burden that is saved, efficiency gains, being quick to market using these tools. But the work has to be put in upfront. The process discipline has to be built. Right training has to be provided both for authors and reviewers, and starting with a robust and up-to-date claims database, which seems like basics, right? It seems like logical, but I'll tell you, a lot of organizations don't have that. And just be honest about it. I mean, there is creating the claims database and keeping it up to date are two different things, right?
Yes.
And
yeah.
And a lot of even bigger organizations still struggle with that. So starting there, and then you build the framework for modules and the processes with that. That's what I think will help us get there. And then confidence building amongst the reviewers with all these processes, and proving the concept, having the right training with, let's say, examples and case studies that'll further shore up more confidence and resources that can be used. I think that's the way to go for going towards, let's say, modular content or AI in the future, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Agreed. I think we all agree. And Kevin, I think in our prep, you even said that it's not only building the confidence of everyone involved, but it's building the trust of everyone involved as well, right?
Absolutely, Jeremy. I mean, trust is a destination in my mind. It's not a given, and it does need to be earned. So when you think of this journey, all of those upfront pieces have to work and work seamlessly to be able to gain the efficiencies in the review. And that's the area that I think organizations really need to understand, that this is different stages along the journey. And if they try to do, the end stage before the beginning stage has a good foundation, it's going to cause a lot of churn in the organization. So that's how I see it, as people just need to be patient and understand pieces need to come at different times of the journey.
Yeah, great point. We did get a question, and perhaps we could take it now and include it in this section of the conversation, but it was asked how reviewers specifically can adapt or have to adapt to the work of modular content, and what insight we have there in that. Does anyone want to field that one and pick that up?
If I could take that up, Jeremy. So I think the reviewers, of course, all the points that had been mentioned by the panelists, all of this has to be implemented, right, before we get this framework up and running. But the discipline part is the most important, because remember, a brand or a product has an ever evolving landscape, right? Most of the times they're being continuously studied, clinical researches are going on, and more new data keeps coming in. So all of these will have an implication on the communication strategies. So by the time you have your original set of modules approved, there will be no new set of modules which will be coming for review and approval. The whole life cycle will continue. And that's why the discipline is going to be very, very important, that the work doesn't get there, efficiencies increase, but every reviewer will have to continue contributing towards those efficiencies.
Yeah. Anyone else additional thoughts on that?
Sure, I'll add some from a regulatory reviewer perspective. When you think about how they do their reviews now, they're looking at specific content and specific context that goes with that content. And you start seeing a shift of some of that if the systems and the AI are demonstrating that it's a direct lift with all the business rule context in place. They're validating that a little bit more than the actual words themselves. They're still doing a net impression review. They're still doing a relative prominence to risk to claims. Those pieces, but it just shifts it the way that. And sometimes you might find out a business rule needs to be updated and changed, right? That's going to be part of this whole process. Is you're going to see it at the end. You're going to go, oh, you followed all the rules, but in this case, it changes. So there needs to be kind of built in, and how the reviewers are really feeding back into the process as well of just approving the pieces and moving them forward and out to customers, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Additional thoughts on this follow-up question?
I think this, Pankaj, Jeremy, if I can emphasize further, I think it's, like I said, it's a bit of a cultural and mind shift change, right? So the reviewers have to adapt to that as well, that, being comfortable with the concept of reusing the content and the modules, and they have to feel their way a little bit into this process, right? I mean, it takes time to, let's say, get there, and it's not going to happen the first time around. So you have to give yourself time, you have to process the time, and reviewers have to go in with that mindset that this is not going to be always a review where you're going to see all of it there. Some of it you will have to make sure that you can connect from what was said in the modules before, or what was documented, and how do you go about being comfortable with that. So I think that's the biggest thing I would say in terms of the transition there for the reviewers. So
yeah.
Can I add there,
Yeah,
Jeremy?
absolutely. Yes, please.
So I'd say, in a way, it could be really restating the issue. It's not so much about what the reviewers won't see, and as the regulatory responsible function, you're going to see it to put it on the 2253 and send it down. So it should be maybe framed up in the way of expediting content creation versus, we're not going to have a review of all materials, because that is the role and the responsibility on the regulatory reviewer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would like to just add, I agree with Iris. The regulatory review doesn't go away no matter how good content modularization works, right? That's a piece that you can't, I guess, mechanize this out, right? It doesn't happen, right? There's always going to have to be that oversight because it is a requirement. It's a federally mandated requirement. So, there are always going to be pieces.
Yeah, and it's interesting that got brought up, because then the question gets posted here: should the matter be rethought in terms of avoiding review and positioned more as an accelerator for content creation, and that it's reducing the burden on reviewers and all assets continue to be reviewed by MRL? Yeah, right, great, good.
Yeah.
We preempted that one, didn't we?
Replace.
Yeah, we did. Pankaj, yes, please.
No, I was gonna say unless they replace us with all the bots, right?
Well, I don't think that's even possible, right? Because
Hmm.
there's so much subjective interpretation that, that net impression Kevin mentioned, that risk evaluation and moderation and adjustments. When you need a physician, you don't go see a bot. When you need an attorney, you don't go see a bot. And, and
Yeah.
a lot of
I
people who fill this role as a regulatory reviewers are attorneys by background, such as myself.
Yeah.
So
We just have to
we're
keep our
still youth.
A game on, Iris, because the bots are coming.
Yeah.
In consideration of the high risk that we just mentioned, and maybe briefly we touch on it, one of the questions that came in is around high risk claims. Can high risk claims be modularized? And if so, how? And if not, why not?
So I think there probably needs to be a tiering system of the type of claims that can be modularized. Low risk claims or low risk assets, emails that you're just reaching out to a HCP provider customer and just say, hello, wanted to follow up after that call we had. Those things are a little bit easier to assess as being something that can be modularized. More aggressive, assertive type claims, high risk claims, I think, individual sponsors, companies would need to make that risk determination for themselves, within the context of their culture and what they can take.
That's a great point. In a lot of the engagements I've been involved in during our discovery session, that's one of our main questions is, how do you define risk? What is your threshold and where is it? It's very important to define that. And it's not easy to do, I mean, obviously, but it is a very important part of this journey specifically. Yeah.
And Jeremy, I'd like to add that I'd like to, in my mind, rephrase it, and let's not call it high risk claims. Let's say claims, are there claims that you can or cannot build clear business rules around, right? It's around the creation of business rules, because there are probably some things that people would think are very straightforward, like it's right out of the label, but that doesn't mean that the business rules can be applied. And I think in modular content, that's the crux of all of this. Is not, is the claim high risk or not, but can you build the right parameters around it to use it in a modular basis is different than trying to identify, is the claim high risk or low risk. That's just, how I'm thinking about it.
That's great. Great. Yeah, thanks, Kevin.
Jeremy, just one other context I want to add in terms of, I mean, of course, anything we do is going to be risk-based, right? It's a risk-based approach. We have to, weigh in the risk benefits, and it's the process maturation also. I think the risk is more in terms of the reuse and how the context will change, right? You have to look at a standalone claim, and then what do you put it with, and how does that change the overall context? And if that's where I think the risk of reuse have to be understood, and that's something goes into the process maturity with these things, that it's hard to, let's say, predict without looking at a specific example, right? And that would help you define some of these things. So
it ties right into what Washington said earlier. Data is continuing to come in. Reinterpretation of some existing data may occur, and you have new epiphanies about some data you thought you understood to be one way, and you now learn after stats has looked at it again, it's a different way. And so that really touches into Pankaj's point that things don't stand still in time. You've got to reevaluate their usefulness at different points in time.
Yeah, and perhaps that leads to as a follow-up to this is the question from Adrian that asks, how do you make it adaptable if you want to present it in a different format? If you have data that you want to present more of or less of, and you want to present it maybe in a different way, right? That kind of is a good follow-up to this part of the conversation as well.
Maybe if I could take that a little bit again. The most important key thing over here would be, how do we define the business rules? Because business rules, it's not just one set of rules. These rules are different. It is intermodular business rules, which Pankaj just mentioned, what kind of modules could be combined with what set of modules. It is intra-modular business rules, which is more content-oriented business rules. What could be said, what disclaimers have to go, how additional text has to be mentioned, what footnotes have to go. And then there are channel-specific business rules, which format is being used and what kind of content should go with what kind of format. So business rules in itself would have to be defined appropriately for us to be able to use the same set of modules, or to use the content within a module in various methods of communication.
Yeah.
And I agree with Fashida, and there's this additional function I want to kind of go back to, is the nature of digital assets. And you think of, even just in social media, Instagram platform is different than a Facebook platform, that's different than a Snapchat platform. And even Instagram within Instagram is different if you're doing different things. This all has to play in, and that's why the regulatory review function is so critical. Regardless of how you modularize these content, the functionality of the platforms in and of itself changes the dynamic. And it's hard to business rule on those things because those platforms change constantly. So there are certain things you can create business rules around and modular, and there are other things that it's just going to be like chasing it, herding cats trying to keep up with them.
Yeah, great point. Let's talk a little bit about change management now, and we'll get back to some of these other questions. These are great questions, by the way. Keep them coming. So how can change be managed, right, for this, and better for the MLR reviewers? So from a change management perspective, Kevin, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, first is leadership across the organization needs to be aligned on the ultimate goal. I think that's one of the things that you can't have the review leaders be looking at things differently or talking about the end goal differently than the commercial side. I think the other piece of it that's, I'm really thinking about is we need to make sure everyone's heard in this process. The reviewers and the frontline reviewers, are going to see this being driven from commercial, which is where it should be driven from. But I think that is one of those areas that they need to be heard. They need their concerns to be elevated and heard as part of the process. And if they're not heard, it's going to create a lot of issues with the change management going on within the review functions.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And in fact, there was a question in there in organizations who typically leads this initiative and this effort. And it is typically and usually commercial, which again, I agree as well, Kevin, it is a commercial function. However, organizations have to recognize that the MLR teams are the key stakeholders here. They are the ones that their buy-in is critical, and not just their buy-in, but building their trust as well. And their involvement up front is critical to this effort, and in order for this to be successful. Vashida, your thoughts here as well.
So again, I would not repeat or add. Probably I'll just add to one of the things that has not been spoken much about is the IT and infrastructure related, aspects that have to be thought through as well, right? While we're thinking through everything, the stakeholders, people who have to be involved, how things have to be done upstream, but also in ensuring that while all of this is being discussed, we understand, what platforms are going to be used to store these modules, or what tools would be utilized to create the derivative assets once these modules are in that space, right? And also, the reviewers would also have to play a role in assessing these tools and AIs and ML systems, and actually providing feedback, whether it's working or not working, and then definitely ensuring that you make all of these systems and practices more robust as you move along. So that's just one more addition. But otherwise, I agree that change management has to be taken care of at every stakeholders level, right? Everybody involved should have there should be, process that should be kept in place for everybody to get comfortable with the whole practice, and that discipline has to be followed through.
Yeah, great. Iris, your thoughts?
I think what we have to say is that this doesn't create more work on just the MLR reviewers. It also creates now new work on the marketers. They have got to invest more time in the creation of their materials. They have got to invest more time in the knowledge and understanding of the materials created for them by their agencies of record. There needs to be more investment in their transparency with MRL as to the use of the assets and tactics and when, where, and how, and with whom. So, it's going to be shared increased work up front. And then as the model matures and the confidence is built, Kevin, I don't know if there'll ever be a regulatory person who says they trust, because there's a saying, in God we trust, all others must verify. So we will continue to get on that continuum of confidence in the model as it matures, where we see business rules and things and guardrails that have been requested, met and complied with.
In sharing that work.
Yes.
Oh, Pankaj, yes, please.
No, I was just going to say, Iris, it's always going to be trust but verify. So, the verification aspect, and in both in joking and being serious about it, is the verification and the level of verification will depend on what is the level of risk that a regulatory reviewer would see with a process or this change as we go on, right? And by nature, of course, we are going to be more risk averse. I think that's the job that we are given, right? And if that risk aversion is provided by, let's say, the IT system validations, processes, confidence that has been built, then it takes less on the regulatory reviewer, but the verification is not going to go away, right? So that, I think that I just wanted to make that point here. So.
Yeah, great point. Great point. And it leads us to not only a question here, but our next question as well, which is the FDA. We have to, we're sharing the workload, we're sharing, all of this with the FDA. What are their thoughts? And Fabrizio posted this question is, have they issued any guidance or guidelines on how modular content should be submitted through 2253? Kevin, I'll start with you.
The FDA has not, in any area I haven't given any clear communication around modular content. It's definitely something that's evolving on their side. I do want to point out the FDA is very much feels that this area of submitting 2253 submissions to them is how the customer sees it and experiences the content. So how clearly you can communicate that to the FDA is very important. So just sending them a list of modules is not clearly communicating what a customer is going to see at the endpoint. And I think each organization is going to have to figure out how best to clearly communicate that. I'm not saying we can't have efficiencies with modular content. I'm thinking we have to really be able to think about how this is seen by the FDA, and is it really reflective of how our customers sees our content.
Yeah. Iris, anything to add? Your thoughts?
Or, FDA really doesn't dictate how we make the sausage, right? They just want us to have the review and approval of all materials used to communicate with external customers and HCPs and patients, payers. So they don't dictate how a company performs the function. The liability and accountability for any false and misleading activities could result in an enforcement from them, and that will go to the company CEO. So they have not offered any guidance in this area to my knowledge, as Kevin has said, but we do know that, for non-compliance, for false and misleading advertising and promotion, fines have now reached $1 billion. That's significant. that can put a new company out of business. So it's a very serious matter when we're talking about MRL review. And so at this time, I think FDA just expects that there is review and approval and submission of materials on 2253 at the time of first use.
Yeah, great. Pankaj, your thoughts here as well?
Yeah, so yeah, again, I agree with my co-panelist here. I think the thing that I want to emphasize is, the rigor and the scrutiny around this is not going to change as far as FDA is concerned, right? Whether you do modular content or you don't, and that's up to the companies to decide. I think, of course, there may be guidance that FDA might provide or other agencies might provide in the future as more of the space matures, but that is not to take away any of the rigor around the expectations and the requirements from a regulation standpoint. And I think the key for the companies is to build, internal processes to be able to make a balance between the speed, efficiency, and the accuracy here. And I think that's where I think we want to focus to say how we build the internal processes so that they can stand the scrutiny and the rigor when it comes to agencies like FDA. So,
Yeah, great points. Great points. We're almost at time. We'll take maybe another question from here. Here's one actually about the AI evolution. So with AI constantly evolving, would that make, or maybe does that make regulatory reviewers, would it make them more confident in the machine assembling the content than a human, or no? What are our thoughts there?
I guess I'll chime in. Personally, if I had a machine telling me that 100% of the business rules were followed and this is 100% pre-approved content, it would make my review a little more efficient and less scrutinized than probably a human being saying nothing else has changed except for this little bit, right? I think there is a little bit, I'd hate to say a little more trust, but the machines, are kind of built a certain way to kind of give us this information. And if they can provide that level of detail, I think it provides some efficiencies. So.
Anyone else want to add here?
Yeah, so Jeremy, I think as I was hinting towards bots earlier in our conversation, I think AI definitely is something that we have to factor in as all of the content is being developed within the industry and specifically within, let's say, pharma med devices. And I think the important consideration there is how do we build the processes and controls so we can effectively utilize that. I would agree with Kevin that I would have a little bit more easier time if it was said that, hey, this is validated by a certain algorithm in a way, and I know what are the considerations there. I mean, we've been in this space, I want to say, since 97, right, when the Part 11 compliance came, and there's been a fair bit of 20 plus years of experience in validating, let's say, complicated IT systems, and the AI would add to that. And then how you build, let's say, confidence around it is by making sure that you have internal processes that can utilize certain aspect of it. But it'll definitely make for efficiency in terms of as far as the review goes, and adding that here. The comment about again relying on a human saying I just changed a little bit, I totally agree with that. I think that's the part that gets us in trouble, right? So
Yeah, great. We only have a few seconds left. If we did not get to your questions, we'll make sure that we answer them offline and share them back. Thank you, all four of you. Thank you so much for joining. This has been wonderful, and appreciate your time. Appreciate the time of everyone that attended. This will be made available on our website, as well as the MLR of the Future webinar that was done a year ago. I think they complement each other really well, and hopefully this will be part of a series from us as we continue this journey. So best of luck to all of you in this journey. And thank you for taking the time. Have a wonderful day. And thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Jeremy.
you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
everybody.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.